So, what we did was to derive a metric. Yeah, the height at which this thing is kept, half of it is useless for me, but let us see. So, we found that the metric of a spherically symmetric source can be written in a fairly simple form, which I will now write in this form: f of r dt square, then 1 by f, which I will write as f inverse of r dr square minus r square d omega square. Okay, where we found that f can be written as f of r, which is 1 minus, we wrote it as 2 gm by r this was the form. So, I want to spend a little bit more time reminding you of what we did. We just assumed that the space time is spherically symmetric and it is it has a source up to some radius, and we said we are solving the Einstein's equations in a region where it is empty. So, if you have a source which is spherically symmetric, we are solving outside, or if you have a source which is like an annular shell, we could be solving either on the outside or on the inside. Then we found that this is the form of the metric, and in particular we did not assume the situation is static. It can be a collapsing shell or some such thing, and the result is still true. And the f of r is given by 2 gm by r, where m is sort of interpreted as a mass by the Newtonian limit. This actually stands for 2 gm by c square r. We have set c is equal to 1, and actually when we go further, it is also convenient not to worry about this g as far as this metric goes, because we will just write it as 1 minus 2m by r, but that m you can think of as g times the mass of the particle divided by c square. So, it is just a parameter in the problem, and that simplifies a lot of writing. Now, the structure of the solution is quite remarkable. It has one f of r here and one by f of r here, and the other is the spherically symmetric part. Okay. Now, I want to make a series of comments about this before we proceed further. Now, it turns out that there are some very beautiful things happen in spherically symmetric metrics of this form. Okay. So, I want to first highlight that. The first thing is, suppose instead of the way we did that, we assumed some a and b and then solve for this in empty space and all that. Let us assume this is the metric. Suppose this is the space time metric. Then you can go and compute the left hand side of Einstein's equation, because Einstein's equation is capital GAB is equal to some 8 pi g times TAB. So, you can go and compute what is the left hand side of Einstein's equation, you will get something. Then you say, okay, this is the form of the energy momentum tensor. If it is there, we have a solution. I mean, it is a cheap trick. You start with the metric and find what the energy momentum tensor is, but if it works, it is well and good. And solving Einstein's equation is such a horribly complicated problem that anything is fair in getting it out of it. Now, if you do that, what you find is the following. This metric is a source if, okay, I mean this metric not with this particular solution, okay, this is separate. Let us just look at this metric. This metric is a source with T00 equal to TRR equal to, let us say, some epsilon of r divided by 8 pi g. This is just for convenience. This is scaling is just for convenience, and T theta theta is equal to T phi phi is equal to mu divided by 8 pi g, where mu is also a function of r. Okay. So, there are two functions epsilon of r and mu of r which characterize this source, and if you plug this in with a couple of equations which I will write down, you can satisfy everything. What you need to understand is that in Einstein's equations written in the form some g I k is proportional to T I k. If I plug in this form of the metric and calculate g I k, it can be a source only if these two things are equal. The equality between T00 and TRR comes because we have forced f here and 1 by f here. We did not keep a and b. We are saying that it is f and 1 by f. The theta theta and phi phi comes from spherical symmetry, and in general this can be one function and this can be another function. Now you go and ask what the equations of motion tells you, and that is actually quite remarkable. Mu of r, okay, just bad handwriting. So it is 1 by r, okay, it is 1 by r square into 1 minus f minus 1 by r f prime is equal to epsilon. This is one equation, and another equation is mu equals epsilon, I do not remember whether it was plus, I think it is plus half r epsilon prime. Okay. What does this mean? What it means is you give me any epsilon of r, you choose for me any epsilon of r you like, I will plug it into this, I will solve for f, then I will plug it into this, I will determine mu, then I have a solution. Okay. So if you give me any function mu of r, epsilon of r, I can have this solution. Now half the time what will happen is that this will have some weird behavior, this will go negative or some such thing. We do not want such bad things to happen. So you cannot sort of arbitrarily choose anything and get away with it, but if you can choose sensible functions and if it does give you solution, then you are through. Okay. So okay, what I have done is the following. You start by assuming this metric, then you compute the left hand side, that you can immediately do. When you compute the left hand side, you will find that G00 should be equal to GRR, therefore the T00 should be equal to TRR. You call it anything you like, you write it epsilon of r upon 8 pi g. You will also find that G theta theta should be equal to G phi phi, and you call it whatever you like, you call it mu of r, right. Then you do the equation, that is G, this should be equal to this. When you write it down, you get two independent equations which are these two. So just there are Einstein's equation for this metric reduces to this form. Okay, that is what has been done, because I did not derive the form of G, I mean you should try it out at some stage just for fun, and this is what you will get. Now let us check what we already know, that is if we take epsilon to be 0, empty space, mu of course vanishes here, and if you put epsilon equal to 0, you can write down the general solution to this in some form. You will find that this equation can be immediately integrated, it is a first order differential equation. So if you do that, the solution will have a form like this, plus 1 by r integral, let us say a to r epsilon of r square dr. There is just one integration constant a, and you could have chosen it in any number of ways. It is done in such a way that when r is equal to a, f vanishes. So at r is equal to a, this will cancel out, and at r is equal to a integral. It is just a normalization. I could have chosen any other way of doing it. There is one arbitrary constant which is hanging around in the problem, which can just be shifted out. Okay. So if epsilon goes to 0, it is just 1 minus a by r. That you can immediately check. If I take 1 minus f, okay, you will get plus a by r, so it becomes a by r square, r cubed, and then f prime will give me a plus a by r square, which with this will become a by r cubed, they will cancel out. Okay. Therefore epsilon equal to 0, you do get a consistent solution, and this is exactly the solution, where you identify a with a constant. How do you determine the constant? You go to a very large distance and you say that the metric should have the form 1 plus 2 phi. That is how we determine the constant. If you are not with me, you should stop me, okay, because now is when we are getting into the machinery of Einstein's theory. Okay. So this is one form of f of r. Now let us try a few other things. So one case which we discussed early on when we studied the different kind of energy momentum tensors, I said that if you take a scalar field and you add a constant to it, that is if you take a Lagrangian and add to it a constant, then you pick up a term which is like I explained to you that this is what is called a cosmological constant or a vacuum energy term, etc., etc. All of them had the form of energy momentum tensor, which was like TAB proportional to Kronecker delta AB, right, with some constant here. So essentially that means you are going to have the epsilon to be a constant. So if I take epsilon to be a constant here, this goes away and it immediately tells you mu is equal to epsilon. So mu is equal to epsilon makes this entire thing diagonal, which is precisely what you have, correct. This into epsilon upon 8 pi g, that proportionality constant is epsilon upon 8 pi g, where epsilon is a constant. Now if epsilon is a constant, what is the solution to this? Now of course we do not have any other mass for the moment, so let us take A to be 0, just set that integration constant to a 0. Then you will get the solution is that for this, the solution is F will turn out to be, we have taken A to be 0, so you have only 1 plus 1 by R, no, I made a mistake in the sign here, it should be minus, okay. It is minus 1 by R times that epsilon, which is a constant, into R cubed by 3, so it is 3 R cubed. So this can be written as 1 minus some constant which I will call h square R square. So let us make that, let us make sure we understand that, sorry about this minus sign mistake. So if epsilon is a constant and A is not there and I am integrating from 0 to R, epsilon is constant, so this will give me R cubed by 3, so it is 1 by 3 some constant into R square, okay. So that 1 by 3 a constant into R square, that whole thing I am calling as h square. So the f of R is 1 minus h square R square. This we will come back much later because this is known as something called a de Sitter universe. If there is just one cosmological constant, then the metric when written in spherically symmetric form has just like the Schwarzschild metric, it has the same kind of a form with this 1 by R being replaced by R square. This is what happens, okay. So this is one solution. Another solution which you can have, which is also quite remarkable, is the metric due to a charged particle. See, the particle which we studied is just a mass particle at the origin. Now suppose I have a charged particle at origin in Newtonian theory. The gravitational field does not care about the charge, it is still equal to minus gm by r. But in Einstein's theory it is different, because if there is a charged particle, it is going to produce an electric field outside. You have a charged particle at rest, so there is an electric field outside. It has an electric field which goes as q by r square. So the energy density of that electric field, E square over 8 pi, will go as q square over r to the power 4, and 8 pi etc. will all take care of themselves. So essentially you will pick up here a q square upon r to the power 4, okay, if there is a charged particle at the origin. So if it is 1 upon r to the power 4 multiplied by r square, you get 1 upon r square. 1 upon r square, when you integrate, you will get a 1 upon r with a minus sign. So the metric for a charged particle will be f of r equal to 1 minus this a, now I will rewrite as 1 minus 2m by r plus q square by r square. This is charged particle. Okay. So I have given you 3 separate solutions. One solution is for the Schwarzschild metric, which is just for a mass point, space time is empty. It falls as 1 by r, the non-trivial part of the metric falls as 1 by r. The second is for a cosmological constant, which is a constant energy density everywhere, and it also has a constant negative pressure. For that the solution increases as r square, as a quadratic term. Then the third one is a charged particle kept at the origin. This will also be accompanied by an electric field which goes as q by r square, and that charged particle has 1 minus 2m by r plus q square by r square. Now it turns out that there is a theorem which tells you that if you have a solution like a black hole solution etc., and it has a mass, charge and an angular momentum, we have not even discussed angular momentum, then all such solution, all such black hole solutions etc., can be characterized by just these two parameters. If there is no charge and angular momentum, it is characterized by just one number, which is the mass. If there is charge and mass, it is characterized by m and q. Okay, and this is called a Reissner-Nordström metric, and one can prove on very general ground, just like we proved that this is the most general kind of solution. Our Reissner-Nordström or Rn solution is the most general solution under the electrostatic configurations. Okay. So in that sense, this is also important. So there is the second solution. As I said, there are very few exact solutions known to Einstein's equation, so you might as well study a few of them. Now I want to come back to a point which I did not emphasize originally. This equation, if you think about it, is extremely remarkable. You see, this is identical to Einstein's equation. Right hand side is epsilon, which comes from this. And so if you write T00, G00 equal T00 or GRR equal TRR equation, this is what you will get. So it is Einstein's equation. Now we have been brought up on the assumption that Einstein's equations are nonlinear, right? I mean it is, you have a, if you want to look at it mathematically, the GIK has an RIK has a gamma square, gammas are derivatives of the metric, so you can't superpose. This equation is remarkable in the sense that it is linear in A. Okay. So if you give me two different sources, epsilon 1 and epsilon 2, I can just superpose, and that is precisely what is happening here. In flat spacetime you have 1, if you put a mass you get this minus 2 gm by r or whatever. Now suppose you add the electrostatic energy, which is q square by r to the power 4, I can plug that also into this, and then I will get this 2m by r plus q square by r square. Suppose I had a cosmological constant and the electric charge. As you can guess, the solution is 1 minus 2m by r plus q square by r square minus h square r square. So you can just keep adding that. That makes life very, very simple. So that is why this is the most well understood and well studied of all the metrics. And it happens just because of this, that in this particular case it is it obeys superposition principle. Okay. So there is, nobody really knows why. I mean in the sense that you cannot sort of look at a spherically symmetric metric with this kind of a source and guess that it should have been linear in epsilon. So it's a good problem to think about, but it does happen when you do the maths, fairly elementary maths, you find that it is like that. Okay, fine. Now I want to go a bit further, and I want to study the properties of various physical systems in this metric. In particular, we are interested in knowing how photons propagate in this metric and how material particles move in this metric. Okay. Since this seems to be going a little bit above your head, I will do it slowly, and you should also stop me at various stages. So we have found a metric, and this metric you can think of it as the metric due to sun, for example, or a star, a compact star or a neutron star. In fact, it represents a black hole as well, but for black hole we will come back again, but certainly a very compact neutron star is represented by this metric, and we want to know what new general relativistic effect will take place around it. So we want to study physical phenomena around that. So the first thing which we want to do is, suppose there is a particle, photon or material particle or whatever, what kind of conserved quantities we can get for that. Okay. For that we have to go back to our geodesic equation, but now it is convenient to write the geodesic equation in the following way. This was the first form of the geodesic equation which we wrote down. So it is d by ds of u, let us say I with a lower index, which is equal to half di of GAB UAUB. This must be lost in the sands of memory, but let me try to remind you. We got this first, Then we said that let us write this ui as g I k u k up, then we differentiated it, kept that g dui by dk there, and then we got two derivatives of g which we put to the right hand side, and then we got the gammas and all that. But this was the primitive form which we got, and we also did the check. If G00 is the only dominant thing and it has 1 plus 2 phi, that 2 will cancel with half and you will get a di of phi, only the spatial derivatives will contribute, and these two things are going to be the 0 and u0, and u0 will be 1 1, and here you will pick up a minus sign because you are lowering a spatial index. So this will become the acceleration equals minus gradient of the potential, right. So just to remind you, this is what we did. At that time I also mentioned to you that this is a very nice way of looking at this thing, because it tells you that if GAB is independent of a particular I, then that momentum is conserved, that velocity, but if you multiply by m, it is a momentum. So in this particular case, first of all, just symmetry tells you that any particle orbit etc. will be on a plane. So just like our old Kepler problem, because there is no force across to that, and in that plane there is an angular coordinate and everything will be independent of angular coordinates. Spherical symmetry on a plane is axial symmetry. So there is one angular momentum like quantity which will be conserved, and since the metric is static, it will also be independent of time, so u lower will also be conserved. For the moment we will concentrate on the second result, that we have a conserved quantity, that u0 will be a constant for any geodesic. I mean I wrote ds here, but I could have used a d lambda some affine parameter and I called it a null geodesic equation, it does not matter. So this is going to be a constant for either photons or for material particles. So this constant I can write as G00 U0, okay. This will turn out to be useful later on, but this U0, you remember the reason it will turn out to be useful later on is if I expand this out, G00, and this is dt by dr. So you immediately get a conservation law or an equation for dt by ds, because you can call this some constant as E or something, is energy per unit mass, that is what this U0 is, and then you can play with it. But before I do that, I want to make use of it in a different context. The context I want to use is a photon which is traveling in this space time. Just to fix the ideas, assume there is a neutron star up to some radius r, very close to that neutron star surface you emit a photon with some frequency, at that at the point of emission it has a frequency, and this photon is traveling to infinity. At very large distance I want to know what its frequency is, okay. This is a very concrete thing, and in general I have a static metric. There are two observers located at two fixed spatial locations, and they are measuring the frequency of a photon, connecting them. No spherical symmetry, nothing, just static thing is enough. How will they be related? Okay. Now this is something which you can actually answer. So I will show you how to do that. First thing you know is that if I have an observer with a velocity, let us say, not to be confused with that u, so some velocity, let us say ui, let me use upper index ui, and there is a photon with a momentum pi, then we know that ui pi is the energy attributed to the photon. Some assignment we have done this, okay. So this will be an observer located at some point 1, let us say, okay. Then if I divide it by the observer located at another point ui pi at 2, I am going to get omega 1 by omega 2. This is the ratio of the frequencies, okay. Now what are these? So first of all I need to know what this capital ui is. So capital ui is the fore velocity of an observer located at some point, and there is a conventional way of writing it. So I will write it like that and then I will explain. This is written as 1 upon n of spatial coordinate x 1 0 0 0. Okay. What does it mean? First of all, this guy is sitting quietly, which means that he is not moving. So his spatial velocities should be vanishing. So this is 0 0 0. So he is moving only along the time axis. Along the time axis I have put 1. Now the overall normalization has to be fixed by the fact that if I take GAB, UA, UB, I want it to be equal to 1, right. It has only the 0 components left, that means G00 into 1 by n square is equal to 1. So n square is nothing but G00. People very often use this notation n because it has a usage in some Hamiltonian form of general relativity as something called lapse function. But more importantly, you will very soon, if you are working in GR, you will very soon find that half the errors are caused because books use either plus minus 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 or minus plus 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 signature. So one would like to have something which is independent of signature. So everybody defines either G00 as n square or minus G00 as n square depending on their convention, but when somebody says what is n, it is a positive definite quantity and we know what we are talking about. So that is another advantage. So this quantity G00 is n square, it is just a fancy way of writing G00. Now let us bring that up. So Ui has only the 0th component, so that immediately tells you that here I have to only worry about the 0th component of this, right. So I have U0 which is 1 upon n times this p lower case, so it is P0 divided by n1. N1 is just shorthand notation for n at x1, bold space x1, and this is going to be divided by P0 divided by n2. The key point is it is not P0 2 n2 P0 1, this P0 is same as this P0, that is because P0 is conserved, it is like U0 of the photon, okay. Hence I can cancel it out and I can write this as n2, or now I can use this notation, n at x2 divided by n at x1. This is the nice result, because what it tells you is that the frequencies are just related to the G00 component, and if it is static you just have to take the ratio and you are through. Remember that this is square root of G00, n square is G00, so there is a square root involved there. So let us now write it in a slightly different way. Suppose I want to know omega at infinity. Okay, so let us take this. This comes from this Ui Pi. Now look at the components of Ui. Ui upper has only the 0th component. So I have to only put U0 and P0, and U0 top is 1 upon n, right, from this, right. So it is P0 upon n1, okay, that is what I have done. So the well, the whole thing depends only on spatial coordinate, because unless it is static I do not have the conservation of this. You see, in cancelling out this P0 and P0 I have assumed that the metric is static. If metric is static, see what I said was I have a static metric, but beyond that I assume nothing, okay. So all the metric coefficients can be weird functions of space, it need not be spherically symmetric, it certainly need not have this form, this formula will still hold. That is a nice result, because the redshift in any space, if a photon is emitted from one point to another, I can figure it out if I know the functional dependence of G00, okay, that is what it tells you. So if I take omega at infinity, 1 is now infinity, it has to be omega at some point, let us say r. I am now coming back to the spherically symmetric cases. This is my omega 2. So omega at infinity is omega at r into this complete ratio. So that is n at r, which I can take to be, let us say 1 minus 2 gm by r to the power half divided by n at infinity, and n at infinity is 1, right. So in the Schwarzschild metric this is the specific result. So, if I have a photon which is going from a radius r with some frequency, when it was at radius r it had this frequency, and then it is going to infinity at very large distance. By infinity I mean very large distance, and there is an observer there who is catching this photon and measuring its frequency. He will find that it goes like this, and if the point at which it is emitted, this is essentially the point at which it is emitted, it is absorbed or observed at infinity. If this emission point gets closer and closer to the short sail radius, the critical gravitational radius, this factor keeps shrinking. As a result of which you can emit any photon you like, its frequency is going to get redshifted and redshifted. So, this is the gravitational redshift. So, if there is one point at which the photon is emitted and it goes to another point, if it is going up against the gravitational potential, it will lose energy. Now, very long back we have derived it from principle of equivalence for weak gravitational field, and that is precisely this result. Now, you could have done this whole analysis by just assuming n at x2 and n at x1 and assuming that x2 is very close to x1 differing by some distance, and then taking the gradients and things like that, and you would have reproduced that result that essentially the delta nu by nu will be like Gh by c square, where Gh is the potential difference between these 2 points. So, this connects back with something which we started long back, and it is in general true in any static metric. Remember, even at that time we only used staticity, we drew these 2 beams of light and calculated how the redshift should be and all that. So, this is the rigorous derivation of the same result using the full machinery of general relativity. Okay. Now, let us go a bit further. If the source is static, well, if there is more than one source, then you need gravitational objects to keep them apart from moving. Is in principle possible, but in practice it may not be. Yeah, you have to keep them fixed. I mean, if there is more than one source, in general they will try to influence each other and move there. But even there, suppose you have one strong source and one weak source or something, and the weak source is orbiting around the strong source, and if you are looking at the whole thing in a rotating frame, that sort of things can be done, but they are all approximate. Yeah. The other case where you can have a completely static situation is when you have something like a cosmological constant. The metric is static in these coordinates, and there is source everywhere. So, you can't even talk in terms of one source or two sources. I mean, the lambda is present everywhere and you still get a result. Okay. So, the next thing which I want to do, I keep forgetting, yeah, okay. So, I go until 5:30 usually, right? Okay, I will probably stop a little earlier today, but let us see. Okay. So, the next thing I want to do is to study the motion of particles, or rather develop the formalism by which you can study the motion of particles in this with this machinery. Now, there are different ways of doing that, and just to do the comparison I will do it in 2 different ways, and hopefully we will get the same equations. So, the first one which I want to do is using Hamilton-Jacobi equations. Okay, this we studied at some stage. So, what is the philosophy behind that? You start with an equation which is GAB dA of action dB of action, and you put it equal to m square. Let us understand the logic behind this. This comes from our standard Hamilton-Jacobi equation. dA of the action is what we call the momentum. So, this is P square is equal to m square. And then once you get the form of the action, you are supposed to sort of find constants in that and differentiate with respect to constant and equate to new constants to get the trajectory. So, let us see what this will reduce to for this particular case, short sail metric. So, I will use f of r so that for any case you can use it, but let us see what it will do. Okay, how does this go? This will go into, first you have G00 up, which is 1 upon f. Remember that G00 down, this is G00 with upper index, G00 down is f. So, G00 up, it is the inverse of that matrix in the, it is a diagonal matrix, so you can just take 1 by, okay. So, it is 1 by f, then a let us say dot square, which is the time derivative, dA by dt the whole square. So, it is dA by dt, dA by dt g00 is the first term in this. Then I will have similarly f a prime square, prime denote derivative with respect to r. So, just make sure you understand how this is coming up. This is g0000 here, grr here, then I have a g theta theta and g phi phi. We will assume that the motion takes place in a plane. There is a very complicated way of proving it, but it is a reasonable assumption. So, we will make that assumption, and we will take the plane as usual to be theta equals pi by 2. Okay. So, you have only the phi term to worry about, and phi term will go as 1 upon r square, because it is 1 upon r square sin square theta. So, it is so let us be sure r square is what comes in the metric. So, here it will be 1 by r square, it is 1 by r square dA by d phi a whole square equal to m square. Yeah, that is 1, because that theta is equal to pi by 2. In fact, that is an interesting quiz question. I do not know whether anybody asked you at your ICER interview, but ICER interview they can't ask because you would not have done Lagrangian. See, you have always been taught that there are if you have you been done Kepler problem in classical mechanics and all that sort of thing. Okay. So, suppose you write down the Lagrangian for a Kepler problem, no relativity, nothing, class mech. So, in class mech you will write the Lagrangian as half m r dot square plus r square theta dot square plus r square sin square theta phi dot square minus v of r. You are doing central force, and you have to find out what are the conserved quantities here. Okay. So, the conserved quantities people usually say are angular momentum and energy. Energy comes from time and angular momentum comes from invariance under angle, and people always assume it has to do with theta. Okay. Because just after that you will write down equations as r square plus r square r dot square plus r square theta dot square. What is the angular momentum? It is usually written as m r square theta dot. Weren't you taught it is m r square theta dot? It is actually m r square phi dot. Okay. Most textbooks call it theta dot, which is wrong. Okay. So, if you look at the Lagrangian does depend on theta. So, the angular momentum, the canonically conjugate momentum to theta cannot be conserved. The reason it is conserved is more complicated. You know that the motion is in a plane. You take a reduced Lagrangian valid on that plane where you put theta is equal to pi by 2, and then you throw away that theta dot term. What survives is this 1 by r square sin square theta phi dot square. Since theta is equal to pi by 2, it becomes r square phi dot square. It is that m r square phi dot which is your conjugate momentum. So, it is the same thing which is happening here. Okay. So, this is what you will have, assuming algebra is all right. We will come back to that later. Okay. Now, you want to solve this, and if you had at least by now done that last problem, you would know what is involved in that, because you solve it by assuming that this A is separable. So, you take it to be minus, let us say, E times t plus some angular momentum which I will call j times phi plus the radial part of the action, which I will use the same form. Okay. So, AR. So, now you plug that in, then this equation becomes 1 by f. So, this becomes E square by f minus j square by r square minus m square. So, let me write it as plus m square here. I brought the m square to this side. I retained this term. I have retained this term. I have brought m square to this side, and I am going to move this to that side, times f a r prime square. This is what you get. Okay. So, if I look for what is AR prime, it can be written in different ways, but let us just substitute here. This is minus E t plus j phi plus AR, which I am going to write as, so you take away that F, so this is going to be 1 by F here and 1 by F square here, and you pull out an F square. So this is 1 by F square times this into F equals this. So I had to just take the square root of that. So the square root of that, and then I had to integrate over dr. So this is going to be dr integral of the square root of that, which will give me first an 1 by F. Then I will have the thing in the curly bracket, E square minus F into m square plus j square by r square whole to the power half. Okay, this is what you get. Are you with me up to this point? So I had assumed as AFR, then I have plugged it in, then I found an equation for this, then I calculated what is that quantity by taking a square root, that will take away this as F, and this curly bracket will pick up a rise to half, that will be dA prime by dA by dr. So A is integral of that over dr, then I plug it back into this. So you have essentially solved the Hamilton-Jacobi equation. So you know that the action is given by minus Et plus J phi plus this quantity. Now you have introduced two constants E and J. So your next step is to take the derivatives of this Hamilton-Jacobi function with respect to those constants and equate it to new constants. So let us first do it for E. So you are supposed to differentiate this expression with respect to E and equate it to a constant, and let us call that constant some T naught. So when I first differentiate, this will pick up a minus T, bring it to the other side. So I get T plus T naught is equal to derivative of this with respect to E, which is contributed only by this. So that will be integral dr over F, derivative of this with respect to E. I already see there is an E square, which means it will pick up a factor 2, so I can ignore that half. So whatever is in the curly bracket to the minus half times E. Okay. This equation gives you R as a function of T. Actually it gives you T as a function of R, because if you plug in the form of F there and you do the integral and all that, you will get a function of R, and that tells you how R changes with T. Unfortunately, this integral cannot be done in simple closed forms. Okay, so you can do it numerically, but it does not help beyond that. So it is done in a slightly different way. So I will try to indicate that, and then we will derive it by a different method, just to show where these things fit in. So from this I can write dt by dr So take dt, then there is a dr already here. So dt by dr is 1 by F, or rather E by F. That curly bracket is a convenient variable, raised to minus half. Okay, which in turn implies that dr by dt, the whole square. So I have inverted it and squared it. So I will have F going on top and squared. So I will have F square upon E square, right, and then the curly bracket inversion means this goes away and just that object. So this time let me write it out in full. It is E square minus F into m square plus j square by r square. Okay. Now I want to do something with this which is actually quite an interesting idea. So, let me spend a little bit of time on that. What I am going to do is to rewrite this in a slightly different way, which will give you a very interesting physical feel as to what this mathematics is all about. That will also check whether we have goofed in the algebra or not. So, I have this equation and let me pull out an f out of this as well. Okay. So, what I will have there is that dr by dt the whole square, I am pulling out that f. So, it is equal to f cubed upon e square into e square by f, which I will write as e by root f the whole square minus m square plus j square by r square. Okay. I have not changed anything. Next, what I am going to do is that I have a e upon root of e square upon f here. I will retain another e square upon f here, and I will take that f square and put it here. Okay. So, this again I will write as root f by e the whole square. So, here is a e over root f, here is a e over root f. The left hand side I will write in a slightly different way again. I will write it as dr divided by root f divided by root f dt the whole square. So, you can see that this root f comes here in the denominator, it becomes 1 upon f, there is a square 1 upon f. So, this is the same equation as what we have derived laboriously from general relativity. Now, suppose for a minute, see this is supposed to be valid for any f of r, for any metric f of r spherically symmetric metric, take f is equal to 1. F is equal to 1 is the metric which represents flat space time, dt square minus dr square minus r square d theta square plus sin square theta d phi square. So, the equation should hold even in flat space time. So, in f when I look at flat space time and f just goes away, I have dr by dt the whole square here. So, f goes away, dr by dt the whole square, there is a e square dr by dt the whole square, which is equal to e square minus this quantity. What does that mean? Okay. What it means is just free particle motion in a straight line, but looked at in spherical polar coordinates, because the particle has to move in a straight line, and you can actually derive that. I will just indicate you how to do that. See, in if you are looking at a free particle, then what do we have? It is again slightly interesting concept. What are the conserved quantities when you look at a free particle in a curved coordinate system? I mean, that is curvilinear coordinate system like an r theta phi coordinate system in a plane. So, we have the relation E square equals m square plus p square, that is for a free particle in normal case. So, m square p square I am going to write as m square times gamma square times the velocity square. So, write a v square here, and then write v square in your spherical coordinates. So, this is m square plus m square gamma square times v square is r dot square plus r square phi dot square. This is standard. Now, the question is, what are the conserved quantities? In particular, what is the analog of a conserved angular momentum? If we are talking about central force problem, and in particular no force problem, which is a trivial central force problem, r cross p is conserved by standard argument, but p is now relativistic momentum. Okay. So, relativistic momentum has an extra gamma. So, what is conserved now is m. So, the angular momentum which is conserved will be m gamma r square phi dot. Okay. So, if you look at this, you have an m square gamma square r square phi dot square. So, it is almost like j square, except for that will give you an r4. So, it is j square upon r square. So, that E square can be written as m square plus m square gamma square r dot square, that term I do not change, the first term. Then this term I write as j square by r square. Okay. Further, we also know that m square gamma square is E square. So, replace that by E square. So, you get the result, which is actually a nice result, that E square r dot square, this quantity, is equal to E square minus m square plus j square by r square, right. Now, you go back and look here or look here. If I multiply this by E square, it is E square r dot square. On the right hand side you have f is 1, E square minus m square plus j square by r square, right. So, this is just free particle moving in a flat space. What I now claim is that, look, suppose I have a particle which is moving in flat space time and it is just moving for a small time dt, and I look at that region. How do I get general relativity out of it? Instead of dt, I have to use the proper time, which is square root of f times dt. Instead of dr, I have to use dr upon square root of f, because the metric is f dt square minus dr square upon f. So, I first make the replacement that you take that equation, which is what this is, and in that you replace dr by dr upon root f, dt by dt into root f quietly, and wherever you see E, you replace E by root f. That is the redshift of the energy. I mean, if you think of it as photons, it is absolutely trivial, and if you take any other material particle, the analysis which we did about Pi ui carries forward for any system. It is just instead of omega, it will be the energy. So, if you replace energy by E over root f, the energy which as you measured in special relativity by E over root f, dr by dr upon root f and dt by dt into root f, you get the same equation. So, you need not have done any of this. Okay. You could have started with this, done the replacement, and the equation you get will be correct. Okay. But of course, it is a strange thing which happens only for a spherically symmetric system. So, in general it does not work. It is again one of the mysteries of the spherically symmetric system, but it is a cute result, and so I thought I will mention it. Okay. Now, there is one more thing which I want to describe at this stage before we go further, and that will be also useful later on. Let us take that equation again and write it in terms of an effective potential. So, this equation can be written as 1 upon f square dr by dt the whole square, that is I have taken the f to this side, 1 upon f square dr by dt the whole square, as 1 by E square times, I will now write it as E square minus some V effective of R, which will also depend on J and M, J and E. So, this probably should be V effective square as a definition, and where V effective square by definition is equal to that F into m square plus j square by r square. So, this is nothing new, it is just rephrasing it, but it gives you a very good physical feel as to what is going on, and in one of the lectures we will discuss it in detail, maybe tomorrow or maybe a little later. The point is, this can be immediately plotted. I mean, you do not have to solve any differential equation for that. Again, go back to Kepler problem or central force problem. In central force problem, if you write dr by dt, what do? You say half r dot square plus r square theta dot square plus V of r is equal to E, r square theta dot square you convert into j square by r square. So, there is an effective potential which is V of r plus j square by plus r square, and E minus that V of r is r dot square. That is what we have done. Essentially r dot square is equated to some E square minus something. So, all the intuition we have developed in Kepler problem in classical mechanics can now be used. If you plot the form of this function, and then you can say between which two points there are oscillatory motions, where are the stable circular orbits, where are going to be bound orbits, etc., etc. So, we will do that, and so you can plot it for different values of j and e, and in fact it turns out that there are lots of surprises. It is very different from the form of the thing which you get in Newtonian theory. Okay, so we will spend some time and do that, but since we have this equation up in the board, I just thought I will do that. Okay. Next thing we want to do from this is to get the orbit equation. So, this equation was for dr by dt, but we also need the orbit equation. So, in order to get the orbit equation, I mean that would be a disaster, right, because we want to put equate to this, yeah, I meant the mass, okay, because we would like to have the effective potential both for material particles and for photons. For photons you will put m is equal to 0 and you will reproduce that, so it depends on the m and j, yeah, okay. So, how do we get the angular dependence? So, in order to do that, you are supposed to differentiate this with respect to j and equate it to a constant. So, let us again call that some constant as some phi. So, you get some phi naught minus phi because when I differentiate this, this phi will come, I am taking it to this side, then the rest is the derivative of that quantity. Okay, so I only need this line. So, that is going to be integral dr over f. Again j appears only with a square, but it is going to finally give a minus sign, but we will come to that. So, because it is a square, I do not have to worry about a half. So, you get this quantity to the minus half again. Then derivative of this with respect to j, which will give me minus f. So, I will just write it as f and take away that minus to make this plus, okay, and this constant just gets readjusted. So, I have taken this f and this minus sign, then I have to take the derivative of this, that will give me a factor 2, which at that half I have not put. So, I will not put that 2 j by r square. This is what you have. That is because this phi naught is some constant, minus phi naught is another constant. Okay, so that is right. So, it just looks like phi plus phi naught, or you can call it phi minus phi naught. Okay, so this is what you get, and that will go away in the next line when I differentiate. Okay, so this again you can integrate, but not in closed form. These are elliptic functions, so and you can plot and you can see how the orbit. It is a good exercise if you are good in programming or in even Mathematica. It is a good idea to integrate this and see for different values of j and e how the orbits behave. You start from a near Newtonian value and change it along, and you will see that the orbit deviates quite nicely, and it is, and there are also websites which gives you these codes and you can look at that. But for our purpose, we want to again convert it into a differential equation. So, we want to do d phi by dr. So, d phi by dr will be equal to, let me get a d phi by dr will be equal to there is an 1 by f and an f which will cancel out here, which I could have cancelled out even earlier. So, I have a j by r square coming from this. So, it is j by r square and the curly bracket to the minus half. Right? And again one would like to get dr by df because you want r as a function of f. So, you have to do an inversion and then you have to square. So, you get dr by d phi the whole square, which will turn out to be r to the 4 upon j square here and the curly bracket. When I invert, the minus sign goes away, then I take a square, so it is just that. Okay. So, again maybe I can write that down explicitly in the final form. So, it is E square minus f into m square plus j square by r square. Okay, so this is what we have. Now, I want to derive these two equations from a slightly different perspective, because it will, in this way of doing this, I started with the Hamilton-Jacobi equation. This is the most economical, most efficient way of getting the equation, but it does not sort of tell you what is going on. I mean, how does these equations emerge, because the Hamilton-Jacobi hides that whole thing, and that is the price you pay for the power. But in this particular case, you can actually do this with conservation laws. So, I want to spend a little bit of time explaining this whole thing using conservation laws itself. Okay. So, in order to do that, you again go back to that geodesic equation where we found out that there are conserved quantities, and one conserved quantity which we have is U0, which we wrote as G00, which is f of r into dt by ds. And let me call this as some epsilon. Epsilon is energy per unit mass, it not to be confused with the d, it is just capital E by m. So, this is a constant. Then the second equation which we have is u phi, which will be equal to g phi phi u phi, which is d phi by ds, and g phi phi, it is the coefficient of d phi square term, which is r square sin theta d phi square. We are working at theta equals pi by 2. So, it is r square d phi by ds. This is something which we have just now done, because this ds, remember, is dt into root of 1 minus v square. So, 1 over root of 1 minus v square is sitting in the denominator, which means it is gamma. It is r square gamma phi dot. R square phi dot would have been your angular momentum under normal circumstances. Now, it is gamma r square phi dot, which is your angular momentum. So, this we will call it some L, which is angular momentum per unit mass. Okay. So, you have two conserved quantities. Now, you have three momentas to, or velocities to worry about, dt by ds, d phi by ds and dr by ds. Okay. So, you need one more, which is given in terms of E square is equal to P square plus M square. So, in this particular case, what you need is the equation GAB UA UB is equal to M square. So, let us expand this out. So, if you do that, GAB will give you first F, then U0, that will be dt by ds the whole square, minus 1 upon f dr by ds the whole square. Okay. Then you have the phi term which is r square d phi by ds the whole square. That is right. So, this is 1, good point. Okay. So, this is the equation which we need. So, we have this, and now we go and plug in for these using these equations. So, dt by ds the whole square will be replaced by epsilon square by f square. So, this will become epsilon square by f d phi by ds the whole square will be replaced by L square upon r to the 4. So, it is L square by r square. What is left is this which we can solve for. So, this becomes 1 plus L square by r square. I just moved to this side, okay, and then I am going to multiply everything by f, and then I am going to subtract this minus epsilon square. That should have given me dr by ds the whole square with a minus sign, which I am going to take care of by flipping the sign here. So, this is what I get. Now, let us compare it with what we have here. We have dr by ds, but this is dr by dt. That is no big deal, because if I take the dr by ds, if I write it as dr by dt into dt by ds, dt by ds is going to give me an epsilon square by f square. So, I will have an f square sitting there and an epsilon square, and I can divide the whole thing by epsilon square. So, that will take away the first epsilon square, that will be 1, and if I divide it here I will also get 1. Then the second, this thing, if you come here, I will have this L square which is an j by m, and similarly I will have an epsilon square which is E by m. So, it is j square by E square, which is exactly what you will have here, because when I divide it by the E square inside that f, and it gets multiplied by f. You can easily see the structure. If you put m is equal to 1, then this 1 plus L square by r square is what is here, and this f is just this f, and epsilon square minus this is just this epsilon square times this, and the one extra factor which you are hanging around is essentially because dr by ds versus dr by dt. Okay. And you can play the same game for the orbital equation. How will you do that? Well, orbital equation, you want something like dr by d phi. Epsilon is E by m, L is j by m, okay, because that is the definition which is used here in both of them. So, that will take care of everything. Now, if you want to work with the trajectory, then you want dr by d phi. So, what you do is that you think of dr by d phi as dr by ds divided by d phi by ds. Now, d phi by ds you can immediately substitute as L by r square, dr by ds you can pick up from this. So, that will give you the equation, which should match with what you have got here. Okay, because I am not doing that, but when you do that, this is what you will get. Okay, fine. Now, let me see how much time we have. Yeah, we do not have too much time. So, this is probably a good place to stop. What I want to do next, someone should remember this equation, and from this equation I want to derive a differential equation for second order differential equation for r as a function of phi. Then we will study the orbits like bending of light, the precession of perihelion, etc. That will be probably take part of tomorrow's class, and I will also discuss the effective potential and features which comes out of it. Then if time permits, we will now switch over to study of black holes. That I will take up in the next lecture. Then the remaining lectures we will do cosmology. Originally I was planning to do cosmology in much more detail, but I ran out of classes. So we will see how it goes.